Pillay. I am from the Department of Communication and Digital Technologies, and together with my colleagues, I manage the National CSIRT, which is called the Cybersecurity Hub, the Computer Security Incident Response Team, which has some collective capacity nationally to look at cybersecurity, specifically across the private sector and civil society. So to that extent, there are some learnings that we have of cybersecurity and incidents that have been happening. And my colleagues are in the audience, so I think they will chip in with some relevant examples as we go along. So just in terms of housekeeping here, what time would you like the session to end, seeing as we started a little late? Or somebody can just keep track of it and just let me know when we need to start closing up?
Yes, Doc, I'll keep you informed.
Okay, all right, thanks. So I think without any further ado, I think the format has been discussed with the panelists. I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves, a little brief presentation, and then we'll jump straight into the topic around what kind of cyber incidents take place in South Africa and how this has changed over with COVID-19, and also what capacity building initiatives have been undertaken in data protection and in combating cybercrime. So with the order that I've been given, perhaps Nishal, if you'd just like to jump in and just do a brief background and presentation. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Pillay. My name is Nishal Govardhan. I'm an internet analyst that works with Packet Clearinghouse. Packet Clearinghouse is an internet research organization. I like to describe ourselves as one of the last few good guys on the internet. We try to build and support internet infrastructure at the core of the internet. I am going to be talking to you a little today about an initiative that we were involved in from about 2017 called Quad 9. Except I am slightly Zoom challenged, so I do have a presentation if you'd like me to show it. On the other hand, I can just speak off the cuff if you prefer.
I think if it's all possible, without any technical hitches, if you can show it, it'll be great, Nisha.
Okay. I think you have to make me host or something.
Actually, the host would have to make you host, so I'm also not the host at this point. But I mean, while they're trying to figure that out, maybe
yeah, let me just speak. Let me just speak from the cuff. So everybody knows. I think everybody on this call probably has a conceptual understanding of what DNS is. It's the phone book of the internet. It's the thing that translates something like example.com into an IP address that you can connect to on the internet, and it's really at the fundamental core of what the internet works on and how the internet works. It's something we take for granted that we don't have to think about anymore. And the system's obviously been in place since almost the birth of the internet, 30 plus years now. But there's some fundamental problems with it, and I'll go through them very quickly. One of the problems with it is that the information that you're sending in the DNS is all by default sent through as plain text, and it's unencrypted. That means that any person that can get between you and the machine that you're trying to speak to on the other side can actually see in plain text what you're trying to resolve, whether you're trying to get to example.org, for example. And they can, using this information, they can build a very, very rich profile of what you're trying to do. They can get an understanding of your browsing, your history, your email, the software on your machine, et cetera, et cetera. And we often refer to this as PII, personal identifiable information. And in today's internet economy, that PII is actually worth a lot of money, right? And that's just one problem. The second problem is obviously if they're trying to see that you're getting to a resource that they don't want you to get to, they can redirect you. They can send you to fake websites, to phishing websites, to malware websites. Those are things that I think everybody here knows about, so I won't talk too much about that. But the fact that it is in plain text is an issue. The second problem is that we're used to using DNS servers that are given to us by our ISPs, or some of you are probably using public DNS services like the very large services like Google and others provide. But one problem that occurs is if these services break locally, then your next immediate service that you get sent to or you get routed to on the internet is probably not something that's close to you. It might be very, very far away. As a function of it being far away, your packets are subject to interception. Your packets are subject to latency and performance penalties for being far away. So there's a performance issue that we want to consider. There are issues of having to go through the entire recursive process in the stack. And I have to apologize again. I actually have some nice slides that show this. And it identifies a whole bunch of weaknesses in the chain. So in 2017, PCH, IBM, and the Global Cyber Alliance, we sat down and we figured out that there were lots of these issues that we wanted to address. And we thought that there had to be an intelligent way of doing this. And we came up with 9.9.9.9, or sometimes called Quad 9, which is a free, public, privacy-aware and secure DNS service that's made available to anyone in the world globally, right? So as a user of Quad 9, what you immediately get is assurance that Quad 9 doesn't collect information about you. The Quad 9 has recently moved into Switzerland, which means that as an internet user, you're basically given the exact rights that a Swiss user has. So you get the full legal protection of the Swiss Data Protection Act available to you wherever you are in the world, which is fantastic. Which means that Quad 9 is in a position where it has to play by the same rules that it will offer any citizen, regardless of where you are, in terms of privacy, in terms of security, in terms of not sharing data. By default, Quad 9 doesn't actually have data. We don't log or we don't maintain any kind of information about you. That's not the goal of the project. The project is basically to be able to provide you with safe DNS, safe and secure and privacy respecting DNS services. And we think that that's really important. There's a whole bunch about performance that I'm not going to talk about, I guess, because it would look better if there were slides. But what you should know, what's important, I guess, for this audience is that Quad 9 is available at all 6 internet exchange points in South Africa, which means it's really centralized to the core of where the South African internet connects. But probably the most important thing, and I think the thing that's really valid here and what Moses had asked me to talk about was how it protects you as an end user in your home, or how it protects you as a business user, whether you're an SMME or even if you're one of the big ISPs. One of the core elements of Quad 9 is that it provides malware protection. So if you're trying to get to a service out on the internet that is, www.randommalware.example, for example, and it's a known malware site, Quad 9 has a list of these that is provided by 19 threat providers. And if you're trying to get to something that one of these 19 providers has identified, Quad 9 will basically return, this does not exist to you. So it protects your end user. And while you might think, oh, that's easy to do, everybody's doing that, I can install an antivirus software on my Windows laptop or whatever. The issue is not just about your Windows laptop. It's about how do you do this at scale, and how do you do this at scale transparently to millions and millions of users across the internet. I mean, my question I always ask folks is, how many of you believe in IoT? And everybody, of course, puts their hands up. So how do you protect your smart toilet? In my home, I have quite a few IoT devices, but I have no way of installing an antivirus on any of the light bulbs in my home that track me around. And for me, Quad 9 is an excellent way of protecting those services. Anything that's trying to reach malware effectively just goes to null. And the last point I want to make, because I know that you want to get to the other users, is I guess the big question: why should you believe anything about Quad 9? Well, I mentioned the first part about Quad 9's domiciled now in Switzerland, which allows really, really good privacy protection to end users. But it's also the only non-profit that's doing that. And I think that this is really, really important, because as a non-profit, we're not invested in trying to monetize you as an end user, which is frankly the goal of every other organization. They're trying to make money out of you. Here, the goal is not to monetize this. It's to provide a safe, secure, privacy-respecting environment that your DNS can operate in. As a non-profit, we're protected by initially US and now Swiss law, so we can't actually be bought out by a for-profit that is going to change the operating rules. And I think that that's important. It allows the end users a sense of security and continuity in how their DNS services are going to be run in the future. I'll pause now, but I'm sure there'll be questions for me later.
Thanks, Nishal. That was great. I think I want to circle back around to how we raise awareness around Quad 9 at some stage before the end of this conversation. I'm going to jump straight into to invite Craig to give a brief presentation, some background. Craig?
Hi, Kira and everyone. Right, so I'm one of the directors at a company called Wolfpack Information Risk. Established the company about nearly 10 years ago. I can't believe it's almost our anniversary. And been actively involved in a number of different community initiatives in South Africa for even longer than that time period as well. So as a company, we actually do consulting, training, perform incident response. We do awareness for typically anyone from a small to a large enterprise to government departments and other African governments as well. So when I speak just now around the type of incidents we're seeing happening in the country, I'll be covering it from a company or from a government point of view, some things that we've seen happening where there's been an increase. But then on the other side, we also manage a site called alertafrica.com, and this has been running now for the last 5 years plus. And there we actually have a number of awareness materials, free awareness materials available for the community. And we also provide assistance to victims of cybercrime and harassment. So we've got a model that allows us to provide pro bono services to an individual or a charity or a school or a religious body, for example. And once again, there I can share some examples of some of the 100+ attacks that we've assisted with over the last while as well. I think what is important for us to all understand is, doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter how old you are, but I mean, if you are a working adult, you typically, we talk about a 3D model where you either work for an organization. So you've got to obviously understand security from a company point of view, an organizational point of view, or if you don't work, you might be a member of an educational institution or a religious organization. So there's that element of organizational security. The other thing then is we are all, private citizens of the country, and we have our own security and our family's security to look after. So touching on things such as your personal finances, social media, your devices, etc. There's a whole lot of things there. So we've got to be cognizant of that. And then lastly, being a citizen of South Africa or whichever country you're from, we all want to see the rollout of more eGov services. I think we all hate standing in queues at home affairs and things like that. So the more the merrier, but everything needs to be integrated around security, not have security slapped on at the end, as many companies in the past do. I think they're a lot more aware of the risks now. So gone are the days where someone could just say, it's too technical, I don't need to get involved or learn more about it. So I think that is an important thing for us all to remember. And yeah, I think as we go through this session, I will be able to share actual examples and stories of what has happened to individuals or to companies, and also most importantly, how can you prevent it, and what can you do to, if you do fall victim yourself, what are the next steps to focus on. So let me pause there and allow the other members to come on, and then we can have a further discussion. Thanks, Kira.
Thanks, Greg. I'm looking forward to the examples. I know you probably have some great ones. I think it's a good point you make about, from a government perspective, rolling out of government services, that security needs to be built in from the very beginning. And I think we need to start looking at the source of errors. Often is at the very beginning, right, at the coding process. So you make a good point, which I'd like to touch on a little bit more going forward. I'd like to then invite, before we do that, I'd like to invite Ms. Zama Dlamini to talk to us about a brief introduction and some of the stuff she's going to cover later. Zama? Can somebody check if Zama's online and will be joining us? In the meantime, I think maybe we'll just jump straight into it, and hopefully Zama can join us. So Craig, since you spoke about incidents, can you perhaps just touch on some of the incidents you are seeing? You know, I think there's a saying that says there are decades when nothing happens, and then there are weeks when decades happen, right? So that's an expression I think emerged from Vladimir Lenin, of all people. But I think COVID-19 to some extent has largely done that, right? In a couple of weeks, decades have happened with remote work and things like that. Can you perhaps just touch on the types of incidents you are seeing, have started seeing since lockdown? And perhaps some perspective on how they've changed?
Yeah, sure. So let's talk about incidents involving sort of larger organizations and maybe some government departments without mentioning any names. I think we've seen a change, obviously, in the way that companies work, with people working remotely. And, you know, companies have had to scramble to find more ways of working outside of the traditional office environment. Interestingly enough, we haven't seen a direct link in that happening, as opposed to, you know, the increase of normal incidents. So what I mean by that is, you know, you would have expected a lot more of phishing attacks being launched against individuals working from home, or their home security not being up to spec. But we actually haven't seen that in the incidents that we've been involved in. And bearing in mind, we see, you know, everyone gets to see a certain level of what's happening in their world. I think when elements of Popia get switched on in the end of June, and companies are going to start having to get forced into disclosing data breaches, etc., we'll get a lot more stats available. So the cases that we have helped with, there was a very high-profile government department that has got access to very, very sensitive information at a national interest level. They suffered quite a damaging ransomware attack. And those of you that are aware of ransomware, where your key systems get encrypted and you get extorted to pay a ransom fee to get your information back. And this particular organization had access to very sensitive public and private information. We're always very nervous because, you know, at times it's not just what you're seeing. You know, so you're not just dealing with a ransomware attack, but you're also looking at a potential data exfiltration as well. So where data not only gets encrypted, but it also gets stolen, and then the company suffers a double whammy, so to say, where they have to pay the ransom fee, and they also have to pay to get the information back, or to be quiet about it. In this case, no ransom fee was actually paid. Fortunately, the company did have fairly good or robust recovery elements in place, and you know, lesson learned, and systems have been patched and they've moved on. So they managed, you know, they had about 2 weeks worth of downtime, not total downtime, but, you know, a number of systems were down, which affected some of the remote locations of this organization as well. We've, of course, seen in the financial services sector 2 quite heavy attacks, one happening in the last few weeks with an insurance company that got, that one of their key systems got compromised. In this case, it was a good thing that they actually had moved the operations more to the cloud, because the actual on-premise systems were compromised. This was another ransomware attack, and fortunately, with them moving to the cloud to cater for their, you know, their COVID employees working remotely, and you know, some of the brokers, the impact was not as bad as you would have, as the attackers actually wanted to have happen to them. Yeah, so I think we're still seeing, I mean, it doesn't matter about the size or the importance of the company. I mean, we helped a school last year that had quite a damaging attack against their, someone actually hacked into their email system and gained access. They created a false account, a Gmail account, and they put a rule in that every time the word payment or invoice was mentioned, that a fake or a copy of that email got sent to a Gmail account that was added to the system. The attacker then had an overview of all the parents that were typically paying. And if you think of yourself as a parent, you know, sometimes parents take their Christmas bonus and they go and put that into paying for, 12 months of school fees where they get a discount. So this attacker was targeting parents, and 7 parents, unfortunately, got sent these templates, which looked like it was coming from the school with the attacker's banking details. And 7 parents actually paid money into a false bank account. And then, you know, of course, the parents were irate and they went back to the school. But at the end of the day, the parents, because they were the ones that paid money into the wrong account, they were the ones that were deemed to be liable. So we also saw a charity that got over R1 million stolen in terms of someone using a spoofed telephone call and spoofed email address to pretend to be someone from they had an outside investment company that invested their funds, and they, in 2 tranche payments, 600 odd and 300 odd, totaling just under R1 million, was actually siphoned from this charity organization. So I mean, I can go on talking about a lot of different types of attacks, but those are the typical ones where we are seeing for organizations. Of course, everyone is very worried about POPIA and the leaking or the breaching of personal information. So that's a massive priority where we're seeing companies scramble now at the last minute to get things done. And then just some high-level points in terms of individuals. We see a lot of cases of online bullying and harassment, and this is not necessarily only at kids. This is typically targeted at women using a sexual nature. The one case that we helped now recently was a direct result of COVID, where people were all working remotely. They had an outsourced company from India, and this one particular lady from the company actually formed a bit of a friend relationship with this one person from India. Just purely innocent from her side, but this guy got a bit of a crush on her, and he left the company in the interim, and he started harassing her very much on a personal note, creating all kinds of false accounts and trying to hack into her systems and things along those lines. So we're seeing a lot of cases of bullying. We're seeing cases of people wanting to invest in cryptocurrencies, false cryptocurrency platforms, everything from puppy dog scams through to general sort of sextortion type of attacks, where attackers are actually pretending to be a pretty lady or a good-looking man and trying to get people to reveal pictures or videos of themselves, and then they extort money out of them. So I think those are the main sort of ones we are seeing happening in the country at this point in time.
Thanks, Greg. That's great. Now, I want to come back at some point to the POPIA, the Imminent Cybercrimes Bill, and the value of awareness programs. Hopefully we have time for that. I think Ms. Zama is online. If she is, Zama, would you like to just give us some background?
Thank you very much, Mr. Pillay. I'm so sorry. I'm struggling with my camera a bit. But just to add on what Mr. Roswin have mentioned, we've seen also a lot, especially when we're looking at organizations, we've seen a lot of malicious domain attacks, something like, since we understand that the users would like to search mostly on COVID or Corona. So when you search a word COVID or Corona, and then you download such material to read or to consume, you'll find out that it is embedded with some malicious software. And another point is with online scams and phishing. He mentioned something on sexting or the personal attacks when it comes to relationships online or online dating. But another thing that we picked up was on phishing per se, whereby cybercriminals will be creating fake websites related to COVID-19, and then us as consumers, will become victims. While we're opening the attachments, you'll find out that just clicking on the links, it affects our devices. But one big thing which as we suffered most was mainly the fact that we were not aware or we were not prepared to work online or to work at home. Most of the users remember that within a nation or within a country, I will just focus in South Africa, we have three structures whereby we have private, public, and we have the citizens. Now, I will not focus mainly on the private entities. I will focus on the public ones because, well, I'm from that side. You'll find out that most of the users or most of the employees were mainly working in the office, and they usually simply use the computers to access their emails, for example. And then right now, they were just supposed to overnight to be introduced to the applications like Microsoft Teams or Zoom as we are communicating right now. And then without any prior training, or even if you can give them a day or two training, it doesn't sink enough for understanding the nature of the demographics that are within our public sector. So having them at home and then having all this information that needs to be now online and the communication needs to be online, it introduced a lot of vulnerabilities on the systems themselves in such a way that at some point, I remember in one organization, we had to go physically to some of the users, especially of a higher profiles. We had to go and really ensure that we train them, one-on-one instead of just working directly with everybody. So the cyber attacks were mainly at a point whereby you'll find out that there are pop-ups, messages, and they don't know. And enticing as pop-ups are, you'll find out that they will just click and then damage their devices. And then looking at working from home vulnerabilities, some of the threats that were there was simply attacks on the systems themselves, the network, and the applications that were used for businesses. And we cannot talk only on businesses or on public sector. Also remember that even schools or our kids, they have to study from home as well. So now there you are having a kid on the computer and on the network, and then while they are busy studying, there comes the pop-ups again. No matter how much you can set up or try to secure your network at home, but if you do not have enough knowledge or have somebody to assist you who has IT background, you'll find out that those people suffered in such a way that some of the kids were left behind in terms of studies because their devices, they were actually damaged. I think I will stop there, Mr. Pillay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Zama. I went to the your municipality website this morning and I saw a warning around tender scams. Are you seeing an increase in tender scams post COVID since the lockdown? We seem to be having some. I don't think the sound was so great with Zama's connection. I think I'm going to move on. So Nishal, I think with this emerging legislative framework, there's an imperative for more public-private partnership around awareness and things like that. What would you like to see around how we promote Quad 9, and that's coming from a government perspective, and how we educate people around these awareness type and preventative measures around cybersecurity and privacy.
Thanks, Dr. Play. That's a really good question. It's also a really dangerous question. I personally am a supporter of Quad 9. One, because my employer, PCH, thinks that this is a good thing to be doing, and it's something that we're doing. But I think that the issue isn't really just about Quad 9, right? And I think that government isn't out there to talk specifically about Quad 9, and I'd be wary of government promoting one particular service. I think that the issue is really to start to get people to understand that this is where the threat model is, from both a security perspective and from both a privacy perspective. And POPIA is a fantastic start. But I think while the 80 or so people that are on this in this call probably realize what POPIA is and may have had some exposure to POPIA, I can tell you that in my family, and there's even some internet folk in my family, most of them don't know anything about POPIA other than the stuff that I routinely tell them. So it's getting that message down to individuals, getting them to understand that this is what your rights are in terms of privacy. And when you look for a solution, when you look for a product, these are things that you should be aware of. It's something that there's a complete lack of understanding at layman level about what an end user's rights are. That's not the case in Europe, though. It's absolutely the case in the United States. It absolutely is. It's absolutely, in the US, no one talks about security really, except the people that are promoting it. But in Europe, it's very different. And in Europe, the general person has a very good idea, in my opinion, in Western Europe anyway, of what they should be looking towards and what they should be expecting to be able to get from government. So if you're to ask me for a message that government had to deliver, I would say let's start talking to the end user and getting them to understand what your rights are and why these rights are important. And whether it's something like Quad 9 that makes a difference or Quad 1 or any of or Quad whatever it is that's going to come up next, I think that people will choose for themselves. If you allow me, I'd like to touch on just one thing. They figured out the slide thing, I think, and I'd like to show maybe just one aspect, if I can, of some valuable statistics, I think, that will show the extent of what we see. And I think that they haven't enabled it yet. Can I do this yet? No. Okay. Well, I was going to show you some statistics from Quad 9's perspective on the number of blocks that we see coming in from South Africa. And I can tell you that right now, we were talking about malware, and we were talking about what happens at home. There's approximately 1.4 million malware blocks a day that we see hitting the Quad 9 services in South Africa. And don't just think about it as a malware block. The way that I always mention it is, it's 1.4 million times a day that some criminal was prevented from doing something online in the South African space, that is. That's how I think that people should think about it. And I think that's the way the conversation should go. People shouldn't just start to think about malware as just being a thing that happens on the internet. It's a criminal activity. And if we're blocking, if one organization can say that there's 1.4 million times a virtual policeman is doing this for you. And again, that's education that needs to be told them. Education that says this is a criminal activity. This is how you protect yourself. And if you can't protect yourself, then perhaps getting the people in between, the internet service providers, to get through this measure of education, to get them to understand very simple tools and techniques that they could use. That's where I think government can also play a role in having let's call them outreach workshops, to say these are standard operating practices that you could have for improving and maintaining and improving security within your space. I can talk a lot more, but I'm going to pause to give others a chance.
Okay, no, that's perfect. I think yes, so certainly, when we look at the emerging legislative framework, the National Cybersecurity Policy Framework, the Cyber Crimes Bill is currently before Parliament, before the President actually has gone to Parliament. There's a strong emphasis on this public-private partnership, cybersecurity awareness, threat exchange platforms, all, it depends on that so largely. Craig, I want to talk, maybe swing back to you and talk about awareness. I know awareness is one of your major mandates within your organization. And is any kind of empirical evidence that these awareness programs are actually working? What kind of programs are probably the best to start looking at things around POPIA and the emerging cybercrimes bill?
So I think, once again, if I have to look at it from a company perspective or at a national point of view, maybe many of the people on the session don't actually know, but we collaborated with Kiru's organization and UNISA and the British High Commission to actually develop a school cyber safety awareness toolkit that was finalized at the end of last year. And of course, now looking at how that can be rolled out by the Department of Basic Education as a stakeholder and or other stakeholders. So there's some really good material that's available there in terms of awareness, that is freely available now to be rolled out to schools and can hopefully make a big difference. But that, as in many of the other initiatives at a national level, it's sometimes we're very good at creating the laws and the structures, but the actual rollout and implementation becomes the challenge. So I hate to use that public-private partnership word because it's been used and maybe abused so many times, but I think that really is the case, especially where you've got all these different industries and you've got different NGOs, etc., that are out there that can, all have their own communities that they service. I really think we need to have a lot more sort of centralized, whether it's government-led and or industry-led, to get stuff out a lot quicker and at a much lower price point to all the important stakeholder communities in our country. In terms of rolling out awareness to a company, we've been doing this now for many a year, and in the olden days we would kind of use it to communicate around policies, and you'd kind of see the people roll their eyes where they just don't want to waste their time. Companies would book out a massive auditorium and have food and invite all the staff to come and listen to security awareness training and things like that, and 5 or 6 people would come, of which 3 or 4 were the security people in the company. We changed our approach about 4 or 5 years ago, kind of at the same time that we launched Alert Africa, and we started making the talks a lot more and the awareness content a lot more about you as an individual. And when you've got topics such as how to protect your children, or guidance for your children or your family around social media, and protecting your home environment and protecting your finances, and how to deal with online bullies, suddenly those topics became a lot more personal and a lot more interesting to people. And adopting that sort of approach where people are often, what's in it for me? What am I going to get out of it? Now suddenly there's something a lot more valuable. And at the same time, you're educating them around the risks of, the positives, and also the risks around, what we're trying to deal with in cyberspace. And then at the same time, you can slip in a few company things as well, so that they now understand why the IT or the information security department is now locking down on social media or other elements in the organization. They get it. Okay, so I think never underestimate the human element, and humans can either be your greatest weaknesses or your strongest defenses in any environment.
Thanks, Craig. I'm trying to follow the chat. I don't think there's any particular questions that need to be answered. Are there any other questions that we need to handle from the audience, Chair? If I'm not able to see any hands raised.
None so far, Doc. You can proceed. There's no question.
Okay.
Those are comments.
Okay, yeah, I can see that, yeah. So if there's no questions, I think then I'm just going to ask the participants, the panelists, for some closing comments, bearing in mind the topic was around awareness and combating cybercrime, issues around COVID. So I'll start in the same order as before. Nishal, are you happy to go?
Sure, absolutely. So I guess my closing thoughts would be along the lines of don't expect users to be smart. We can certainly show them what they should be doing, but don't expect them to do the right things. The data that I have globally shows a little otherwise. That since people have been home at COVID, they are not afforded the protections that they would have gotten behind their company firewalls, their company IDP services, and expect that this is going to continue. People are going to continue to work from home for the next period of time. So if you're the policy maker that's setting rules for this, expect people are going to be at home and think about how to protect them silently. And if you do, and if you want to talk to me about how Quad9 can do it, it's a free public service. I'm happy to talk to you. If we could have the slide shown, my email address is nishal@pch.net, and I'm very popular, visible everywhere, I guess.
Thanks, Nishal. You make a good point. I have a student currently researching whether the culture of cybersecurity within an organization in that physically in offices gets transferred when a person moves over and starts working from home. And it's going to be interesting to see how we start handling this remote work going forward. But thanks for that. Zama, do you have some concluding thoughts? Hopefully your sound's slightly better.
Thank you, Dr. Pillay. I guess I would close by ensuring that transferring my hopes to you together with Craig and other partners that you're having on cybersecurity awareness. But I just hope that you will extend the awareness not just to the employees as such, but to all spheres of our communities and also of our nation. But also to add, we understand that all the cyber threats that we're facing, they're not simply individual or business, but they also look at the critical infrastructures of the country. So it is also imperative for us as the experts in the area or in the domain to ensure that we continue to upskill ourselves and keep ourselves online, and also checking that we understand not just at a local sphere, but we, as you have invited, I think it is Kevin. It is great that we have that international understanding, especially because we know that these attacks, they're not just, they're boundless, actually. So cybersecurity awareness is great, and also ensuring that our system also, they are up to date. I thank you.
Thanks, Emma. Craig, maybe some concluding comments?
I think let me end off on a personal note with a quick little story, and I'm going to focus it on your kids, and if you haven't got children, on your nephews and nieces. Don't underestimate how important something is online for them. And let me give you a quick little story. A colleague of mine had a 15-year-old brother, and he played an online game, a Call of Duty online game, and he was very, very serious about it, such that when he started losing, he went to his parents and he was upset, and he started getting very moody, and he was blaming a whole lot of things. And what would most parents just typically do? It's only a game, get over it, type of thing. Unfortunately, this youngster, 3 days afterwards, threw himself out the flat window and committed suicide. And that for me was a real wake-up call where, with my children, I actually sat down and had another talk to them around, because they're always coming to the whole time about, look how well I've done in this game, or have a look at this cute video on TikTok, or whatever the case is. So as parents, please, although we've got technology that can help us, make sure that you are paying very close attention to what's happening, especially with your kids in this very connected world that we live in. Thanks all.
Thanks, Craig. Very somber note to end, but very, very, very important. So I think that's the end of it. We didn't get too many questions from the audience, but I think thank you to the panelists. You did a great job laying out the groundwork and on your specific topics. And Chair, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pillay, and thanks so much to Nishal, and thanks so much to Craig as well as Zama. We appreciate it. The discussion was very serious. I saw from the comments that people were sending. Colleagues, some of the speakers, panelists will continue sharing their contact details in case if you want to take these discussions further. Please feel free to do that. And let me also confirm that these sessions it's not the last one, it's rather the first one. So we're planning to continue having these kinds of discussion in these kind of platforms. So thank you again. We're gonna be moving to the next session, which is gonna be the session 7, privacy and protection of personal information. We're starting at 13:45. I'm thinking that maybe we could just take a break because the moderator and panelists will be ready around 13:45. So if we can take a break now and come back around that time, that would be really well appreciated. Thank you, colleagues.